Yo, what's good everybody? My name's Alckemy. Welcome to the channel. Today we're going to be taking a look at the approach to this patch, which I'm not going to pretty much walk through the whole thing, but I'm going to talk about how to set something up like this. And yeah, this is what it sounds like. Not too bad. It's pretty apocalyptic, lots of cybernetic sounds and lots of really interesting movements that's very metallic. I think that with a little bit more distortion, maybe some OTTs and stuff, you can probably use a lot of these movements and motifs for things like rhythm or any other kind of harsh genre, if you will. I kind of found this patch on accident. I was actually planning to do another video on how to like make a bunch of different melodic pieces out of one patch, but you know, sometimes you have these happy accidents. So if I were to turn everything off, this is pretty much the patch that we have. Which actually on its own is pretty cool. It's not that bad. But really what we want to think about is creating just a very simple tone and then randomizing a lot of parameters around it in order to get all the crazy stuff that we're getting right now. So the main thing is that you can see down here that I've got a bunch of different randomizers and they're all doing cross modulation and whatnot. But at the basis of what we're trying to accomplish, you really just want to grab a sine wave and you want to grab an envelope that is going to do a couple of things. The first thing is that the envelope is going to control the pitch. So sometimes we want the attack to be really short. Sometimes we want the attack to be long. Sometimes we want the decay to be short. Sometimes we want the decay to be long. So if we have that set up here, and then we attach some randomizers to it, then every time you hit on a key, sometimes it's going to give you different pieces of motion and whatnot. The second thing is kind of the same length with doing FM synthesis. You can see that I've got two extra wavetables that are being sent into the phase here. And so what I'm doing is pretty much the exact same thing. Whenever I apply this, right now it's doing the same thing every time, but if I were to turn these on, you can see it's also doing the same thing every time. But what I've done was I've added these randomizers. I'm not really even sure which ones they are now, but maybe it's the first two. You see how every time I push a button or every time I push a key, it's going to do something different each time. And so from there, you're relatively off to the races because it really just comes into a matter of stacking effects that are all being randomized together. So I guess some typical use cases that I have with this are changing the harmonic on a randomizer. So there would be that. You see how I'm getting all these cool little bites and stuff though? Like that's super awesome and totally usable. But once you have that, everything else that kind of comes along with this is a matter of doing just crazy effects. So we have filtering, we have slice EQ that's moving around, we've got distortion, chorus, reverb, different delays that are being triggered at different points of time. Yeah, more filtering, pitch shifter, ensemble, delay, distortion, slice EQ, filter, like notch filtering, reverb, distortion, and then some compression to try to keep everything like relatively consistent. This is a final neurochain. This is the thing that I put on all my basses, which just kind of pulls up the high end and pretty much makes the low end mono compatible, if you will. But using a limiter, we can kind of adjust everything to make sure that it doesn't blow our ears or our socks off. But really the whole premise behind this, after we kind of understand that, is you want to go crazy with the different parameters and stuff. You'll see that on just about everything that I have, to some extent, maybe not this distortion in particular, but 9 times out of 10, if I have an effect on here, I'm randomizing it. And you can have things randomize each other. You can send a randomizer into another randomizer. You can do all different kinds of fun things. But really, we're just trying to create interesting interactions that create a different result each time. And so through that, I'd say if you want the metallic tones, start by building a metallic sound, which is just stacking FM. Be kind of careful with it, but you want to just, you know, take a sine wave, apply a little bit of stuff to it to where it's got some harmonics, and then apply another instance of it, as I've done with this wavetable here, to make it kind of have that bite, if you will. And then once you have that, you know, just a combination of distortion, filtering, delays, and reverb will give you a bunch of different crazy sounds. Kind of like that. So the final thing that I'll talk about is like once you've built these crazy racks, you kind of want to backtrack just a bit and move off of some key things. So for example, I've got this filter right here, or this rack right here, macro, sorry, that's a filter control. So this means that it's controlling all the different filters in case if I don't want it to have like the neuro type movement. If I turn it on, you might not even be able to tell the difference, but what I'm doing is activating all of the complex filters that I've placed via the slice EQ. So if I turn this off, it does nothing. If I turn this on, but the whole point of it is I'm trying to get different results by changing and modifying these effects over time in a means of having just a touch of control of shaping the timbre, even though these things are kind of going off and going crazy on their own. You could organize this in a bunch of different ways. Like I could have just set this up in a multipass rack if I wanted to, which I probably should have done, to be honest. But at the same time, you can try to send a majority of the effects to different macros and start to play with mixing those in if you wanted to. Like I suppose we could, adjust this on the delay and say, okay, well, now I want to make sure that unless if I have this macro turned on with this guy, we'll set this to halfway and turn this off. I'll change this to delay, then it's not going to make any delay sounds. So, but then if I turn it on, we'll get some of those tones. So that's one way to organize it. The other thing that you can do is to kind of just dictate stuff via randoms. So let's say I don't even want to do things with effects. I just want to control this whole rack with a random, or sorry, this whole rack as a mix. And that's kind of the cool thing about modulating modulators, is that you can kind of like cross do things. I know that doesn't make sense, but what I can do is I can set this to off. And so now anytime I change this, we're going to say random 2. Unless if this is turned on, whatever effects these are being sent to are not even going to trigger. So but you see how that gives us more control over shaping the random sounds. So hopefully this gives you some insight into how I make some of these crazy patches and whatnot. But I think that the approach is much more important than just saying, here's the patch. Don't try to recreate what it is that I'm doing. There's like way too many like things for even for me to keep up with. But at the same time, hopefully this will give you some indication on how to get some randomized sounds that you can later pull into the rolling sampler, or to just set a resampling channel as a whole. And then later, once you have something that's kind of interesting, you can kind of be like, all right, well, this little sound is cool, so we can use something like this as a fill. Or, we can try to create a riff out of this, maybe on like, every other like half beat or something, and then start to build an EQ and further process and take different other sounds that we can kind of manipulate around and try to find some interesting motif or thing to build a beat around. Or we can even do something kind of like this and create like a weird rhythm like this. I really like that sound, so if we were to, I don't know, but what I'm saying is that you pretty much get into the, fishing for cuts and stuff once you have a bunch of material to work with. But even still, I think that if you can kind of even layer this with some sub and just create like one specific sound, right? So even just if you repeat that, put some OTT on it or something, change it to the proper BPM. So, something that's like a fourth, maybe even 140. That might make more sense. and you were to you can find a bunch of sounds and stuff like that that kind of cut together and make more sense in that genre or whatever. But in any case, hopefully that was helpful to you all. I thought this was a cool patch, so I wanted to share it with you. But if you have any questions, let me know in the comments, and I hope that you all have a wonderful rest of your evening. Oh, be sure to like and subscribe. Check out alchemy.com. Book a lesson with me. I'm $40 per session, so I feel like I'm relatively reasonable. Okay, now for real. Bye.